Okay. Welcome to week 3 of College Football Primer. And there's a lot and a little on our plate today because the schedule this week is kind of mixed. And by mixed, I mean there's not a lot of good. But that usually means that something crazy is going to pop off. So the order of operations today is coaching controversy, then overachieved, underachieved, then top 10, then best game, best nightcap, the usual stuff. So let's start with coaching controversies. And we're not talking about play calling. We're talking about life decisions. And we're going to go small to large. So the first one is kind of small. But if you talk to a lot of people, there's some debate over whether or not this is a minor thing or a big thing. And this goes to my alma mater, Oklahoma, where Jeff Lebby has a father-in-law named Art Briles, who was head of the Baylor program when it found out that they sat on and covered up allegations of rape and sexual assault that was perpetrated by their football players. And, Art Briles is out, in the sense that, he can't get a job. He can't get a job anywhere. He can't even get a job at, Liberty, where coaches go to resurrect their careers. He can't get a job with Nick Saban. He can't. There's nowhere for him to go. And yet, after the game on Saturday, he was on the field with his son-in-law and their kids, and he's wearing OU gear. And there was a post, a picture tweeted of him being Art Briles in Oklahoma on the field. And a lot of people got ticked. Now, here's the deal. Jeff Lebby, who is the Oklahoma offensive coordinator, and his son-in-law, basically said, this is... I hear my dog. That's the father of my 2 children. Here's the quote I've got in front of me. That's my father-in-law, Lebby said. He's my father-in-law. That's the grandfather to my 2 kids. He was down with our entire family after the game. Well, after the game. And so he went to bat and was like, this is not a big deal. Despite the fact that many people did see it as a big deal. And there was also this perception that he was handed field passes, that he may have been on the field the whole game. And our athletic director for OU, Joe Castiglione, was asked about it and said, quote, I was just as disappointed as many of our fans when I learned of the post-game situation tonight. It shouldn't have happened, and it was my expectation it never would, based on boundaries we previously set. I've addressed it with the appropriate staff. Okay, you need to understand that when Jeff Lebby was hired from Ole Miss after Lincoln Riley bailed for USC, there was discussion of whether or not, this is too close to the scene because of his relationship being the son-in-law of Art Briles. So that came up, and I imagine based on what Castiglione said, this came up in the interview, look, you don't bring your father-in-law around, you keep him away. One of the things I saw on Twitter was talking about, during the debate, whether or not, this is kosher, he's a family member. Someone was like, well, Bob Stoops' mom was at, every game, and it's not like she was out walking on the field afterward, So the fact that he's out walking on the field and wearing OU gear and it's just, casual is bad. But I think the worst part is, it seems like this was discussed in the job interview of yo, if you come here and we bring you on, this doesn't happen. You disassociate yourself from your father-in-law. He is not allowed around here. And then Lebby put for his Facebook or Instagram social media picture, he put the photo of of Art Briles, him and his kids that from that night on his profile pic. After Castiglione said, it shouldn't have happened, and it was my expectation it never would. Dude, what are you doing? It was getting to the point where, Oklahoma newspapers are coming out and saying, Jeff Lebby probably needs to be let go. Like, that's how ridiculous this was and how borderline insulting it was. So, like, dumb coaching decision. He came out today on Tuesday and said, hey, I have a statement to read. I apologize for what I did and the distraction I've become. This will never happen again. And I imagine that, like, Venables Castiglione sat down and said, like, your job is done, terminated, period. We don't care. Like, we are not associating ourselves with someone who is, like, basically covering up for rape, which is, like, insane. And yeah, and he shouldn't get a job. It's not like he's in jail, but he needs to be put away, or like kept on the shelf, so to speak. So that's number one. Where like Jeff Lebby was being stupid. It's not like the offense had a great game anyway. It's not like it was, say for example, it was like the national title game. Like, okay, like I get it. Like you want to share this experience with your family. Like that's a little more passable. SMU, when your offense didn't perform that great, not great. All right, then the big one is Mel Tucker at Michigan State, which has to be, I think, one of the things that we're just gonna get off, like our plate, like immediately, is how, like, how much these guys think they can get away with. Like Art Briles is a great example of like, oh, all these multiple. I mean, I think we're talking like 50 allegations of sexual assault, harassment, and rape combined, right? I mean, like, again, it shouldn't be, I mean, one is enough of any of those. So I'm like, oh, well, how are we going to split? That's how ridiculous his situation was. Oh, my dog. I've been confined to the kitchen. But, and his name is Norman. Yeah, these guys, I mean, okay, so Mel Tucker, Art Briles, this is when Art Briles brought Baylor to become a preeminent program in the United States after being in the basement forever. And he allows this to go through and just doesn't care. Okay, same with Levy. Like, he's told, hey, you probably shouldn't do it, doesn't care. Okay, at some point, it seems like either A, these coaches are getting a head that's too big for their body, or the money is getting to them, or like it's you have to be a borderline sociopath to be a head football coach in this country, which makes sense. Like the amount of time you got to put in, and effort, like time and effort and dedication, it's insane. So let's get to Mel Tucker. But I'm saying that like this is a pattern of behavior. Bobby Petrino, who's now with A&M, he was also just like, all right, you don't get to coach anymore. So Tucker this week, Tucker signed an $80 million contract with Michigan State 2 years ago, just 2 years ago. Okay, he is currently suspended without pay due to the relationship he had with a woman he hired who was a survivor of gang rape. Like, oh my God. And she's become a public speaker. I'm trying to get her name because I feel like it's bad that I don't. Brenda Tracy. So when she was younger and working at the University of Oregon State, I believe it was Oregon State, she had this situation and now she speaks out to players, and Michigan State hired her. I believe it was through Mel Tucker. And then they developed a relationship. And there's now a question as to, was that a romantic relationship? Was it not? Was it for a little bit? Then did it break off? Like the point here is like, it doesn't matter because either she was employed by the university to speak out. They had a relationship that was professional that then blurred the lines to personal. And then he's going to get on a phone call with her and jack off, masturbate, whatever. And so And he asked her like point blank, like, hey, okay, and she was like, no, and still did it. So, why a guy who has not been the best coach since he signed his contract with Michigan State for the past 2 years, who works for a program that failed to act against Larry Nassar, who was accused of sexually assaulting more than 300 female athletes, who is now in prison for 100 years. And like Michigan State basically like did not do their due diligence. That's one of the reasons why like this was kind of a huge issue. He works for that school, and then he's doing whatever we want to call it. Masturbates with this woman who he has hired and this university has hired, who is speaking out against sexual assault. Like, how dumb do you have to be? How dumb are some of these dudes? Seriously, like, what in what world? And again, like, he's come out and said like the university is kind of doing a witch hunt and there's a huge statement. Okay, yeah, I get it. Like, everyone's gonna lawyer up and it's gonna go away. He's probably gonna, be let go, but they'll settle. It's like I know there's this fear out there with men that like women will accuse someone in power or of prestige or of wealth of sexual assault if they don't like get what they want, or if they want to bring them down or whatever. Okay. And that's kind of what Mel Tucker's alluded to. Like, there was at one point, there's discussions of, like, she said that she wanted someone who's like a sugar daddy, or her sugar daddy. And they're, even in the investigation, they've talked about going through their phones, and both of them have deleted texts. Like, there's a he said, she said, everything has a story like that, but okay. And it's like, fine, dude, fine. Like, you're not denying that occurred. But the dominoes that are stacked against you in this situation are the fact that you're at Michigan State, who's had a history of covering up sexual assault allegations, and then you perpetrated this with a woman who you did employ in some regard and Michigan State has paid, and then she's a rape survivor. Like, what is wrong with you? Honestly, how dumb do you have to be? Like the Levy situation, where you're posting in the Instagram your father-in-law, disgraced father-in-law, after you had a talking to at the press conference about, did you think this was a good idea? Like, this is all in a 48-hour period that these two things are going on. In some sense, this is just Sunday. So, like, this, in my mind, again, I don't, like, the last thing I'll say besides, like, highlighting the fact that, like, I don't know how much dumber you can get. I don't know how much dumber you can be than these two adults who should know better in every regard, who have these prestigious positions at these wonderful universities that they represent young men and women, and they're making these callous, ridiculous, outrageous decisions that could like get them fired from their job forever. It's just, I can't fathom it. And so to wrap this up, as someone who works in public education, I can tell you, and this is the scary part, that this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is just what's getting out. Okay? Like, this is just what's getting out. This is not, this is nowhere close to the full story of what goes on any campus anywhere. And it's got to be some really bad stuff that they just found a way to, like, sweep under the rug, or, hey, we should stop this, or it's, and it's sad to think that that's what's going on. Like, when we talk about how wonderful, the reason why we have this podcast is because we want to talk about how wonderful and amazing the pageantry and tradition of college football is, and when you have this stuff go on, and it just highlights the fact that, and dovetailing, I think, honestly, with the money and NIL and the conference realignment, just the sport is run by sociopaths. Like, if anyone wants to tell me that Nick Saban is probably not a borderline sociopath who just knows how to keep things in check, Like, have you heard that? I mean, that guy, okay, I already said the last thing. He's calling in to live national television to plead for Alabama to make the playoffs. Like, good Lord, have some dignity. Anyway, the coaching thing is just kind of wild. All right, overachieved, underachieved. I hate to say what I'm about to say. We're going to start with overachieved. Texas football. Kudos to Texas football. They probably should have won last year. Like, if Ewers is in last year against Alabama, they win. I didn't think they would win. It's insanely hard to win in Tuscaloosa. And there's a quote from Sark, but I didn't want to tell the guys, but Alabama was 52-1 in their last 53 home games. And then he goes, I guess they're 52-2 now. Ho, ho, ho. Okay, Bryant-Denny Stadium. That place is really hard to win at. And I would think that Nick Saban has been prepping for this game all offseason, knowing exactly like Texas bringing in like a pretty loaded team. And they lost their best player in Bijan Robinson last year, and they're still just like, they aired it out, man. They just took advantage of that secondary. And so Texas has been this, are we back? We're back. No, we're not back. Are we back? We're back. No, we're not back. Like up and down. They've got a long road ahead of them. And it's going to be interesting to see if they can make it through Lawrence, Kansas. It's going to be interesting to see. I don't know if they play Texas Tech this year because the Big 12 schedule is kind of off. Let me just pull up the schedule right now as my dog ruins the audio. I still need to figure out like a better way to do this. But to the 10 of you who are like actually listening to me, they are playing Texas Tech, and it's a night game, but it's in Austin. Oh my God, that's the last game of the season. And they play Kansas State, but that's also at home. So, and they, TCU, BYU on the road. That's going to be. Oh no, they're not. They're at home at Texas. So, TCU on the road. It's going to be interesting as well. So they've got a few bumps. I mean, who knows if Baylor's going to be interesting at all. But I would say like they passed their big test. And they looked really good. So they overachieved in my book. They weren't even in our top 10 last week, but they are now. So as I breathe in, congratulations, Texas. And go Big 12 in some sense because they've been garbage. 2 small schools, Appalachian State, UNC. Appalachian State took UNC to double overtime. They lost, but again, they're like the little brother in the state, and they did really well. Same with Eastern Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky versus Kentucky, they held them pretty close. That score was, let's see, I should have it up. Oh, crap. Did I not get this right? Eastern Kentucky versus Kentucky football. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, Eastern Kentucky. It's so... I don't know if I'm going to edit out what I just skipped. But at the same time, Eastern Kentucky's so small that even when I Googled Eastern Kentucky first, it didn't come up. And they're 0-2. That game was 7-7 at half. So that's pretty good. I think the final score was 28-17. So kudos to Eastern Kentucky for holding their own against an SEC team. And then finally, Houston and Rice. So first of all, I think a lot of people, including myself, were very kind of hesitant at picking Texas to beat Alabama because of how poorly they started against Rice. And I was like, I don't know, Rice kind of sucks. But Rice held their own against Houston. 43-41. They went out to like a 21-point lead. Yeah, 21-point lead in the first quarter. It was 28-7 at half. And Rice is now 1-1. So really good job for all these like smaller schools in these big states going against these big programs. So good job, small schools. And then 3, the Notre Dame offense. Okay, and we'll talk about this when we get to top 10. But I really like Notre Dame. And I know every year we are like, Notre Dame is like Texas, where like they could have a losing season and people are like, oh, but with Notre Dame, oh, we know Notre Dame, and when college football is good with Notre Dame, and it's just like ad nauseum, like this, you want to throw up. But I genuinely believe that like they're on to something this year, and they've really put things together, be it at quarterback and running back, wide receiver, tight end. I mean, like they've got guys who contribute. Right now, points per game, 43.5. That's number 10 in the country. Yards per game, 32. Okay, yards per game is 450 yards per game, but they're 32nd in the country. Points per play, number 7, and then yards per play is 9th in the country. So in terms of like these stats, they're 10th in the country, 32nd in the country, yards per game, points per play 7th, and then yards per play 9th. That's pretty good. Okay, that's really good. Now they're not playing against like a ton of amazing teams, but at the same time, like they played North Carolina last week and North Carolina State, and that was 45-24. Again, the scores. The final line for Notre Dame's first 3 games: 42, 56, and 45. And North Carolina State is known for having a pretty staunch defense. And I think the other thing that's interesting is like Sam Hartman, when he was at Wake Forest, like NC State usually gave him some fits. And his final stat line was 15-24, 286 yards and 4 touchdowns. The game was 17-7 at half, and then in the fourth quarter, and then it got close, but in the fourth quarter, Notre Dame scored 21 points. I think they're really good. They have guys who can really. I'm gonna mess up his name, Audric Estime. I mean, even his stat line has been pretty. 14 carries, 134 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So I think Notre Dame could really do something this year, and their schedule, like it cuts both ways, because next week is gonna be so awesome. We won't get ahead of ourselves, but we will with Notre Dame, because they play Central Michigan this week, which, again, they're going to like throw the ball over. Then here's their next 4. I mean, we're going to go through the whole thing, okay, because it's awesome. Next week, Central Michigan. After that, number 6, Ohio State, okay, and that game is at Notre Dame. That is going to be a night game. Oh, my God, it's going to be awesome. Notre Dame is then going to be going to Duke. Number 21, Duke, the next week. Then Louisville. Then they're going to then they're going to host Southern California. Sorry, I'm going to call it South Carolina. USC. Trojans. Dude, oh my God. So, they're a good team. I like them. But the next few weeks are going to be like awesome. Central Michigan, Ohio State, Duke, Louisville, and USC. And then they've got Clemson as well at Clemson. And the way Dabo Swinney is going, oh my God, that might be like his job being like on the line. So keep your eye on Notre Dame. But I think they've overachieved. I think their offense has been really good. Underachieved. Holmgrenson and Houston have been absolute ass this year. Total ass. And what's weird for me is I was going back and looking at his time at Houston, and I thought it had been like notoriously bad, but it hasn't been that bad for the past few years. He started 4-8, and that was in 2019. Then he was 3-5, and this was like the COVID shortened stuff, right? With 3-5, and then 2 years ago in 2021, it's weird to think that was 2 years ago, 12-2, and then 8-0 in the American Athletic Conference, first, and then 8-5 the next year. So a little bit of a regression, fourth. But they won both their bowl games. And then this year it's 1-1. But man, last year I swear they finished on this horrible run. They haven't been very competitive against big teams. And then just to lose in your own city to Rice. Oh gosh, just dude, I mean, that's rough. So Houston underachieved for sure. That was horrible. The next one is Big Ten offenses for the second consecutive week. The Big Ten, including Iowa, who has to average 25 points per game, or their offensive coordinator, the Suns coach, gets fired. For the past 2 weeks, that whole division in the Big Ten has not averaged more than 25 points. The first week, Purdue 35, Illinois 30, Northwestern 7, Wisconsin 38, Iowa 24, Minnesota 13, Nebraska 10. This last week, Purdue 24, Illinois 23, Northwestern 38, Wisconsin 22, Iowa 20, Minnesota 25, and then Nebraska. Ooh, Nebraska's so bad. Nebraska's averaged 13.5 total points the past 2 weeks. So they have underachieved. I mean, no one should be shocked with Iowa, and everyone should be kind of glad that they're around 22 points per game. That's not bad for Iowa, but they should be a little, better. Nebraska's garbage, and then Minnesota should be doing way, way, way better. So, that's kind of rough. And then finally, Texas A&M underachieved in Miami. They got rocked. That was our most interesting match last week, and it was interesting for a quarter and a half. And then by the end of the third quarter, it was just done. Jimbo Fisher, Bobby Petrino, do good riddance. If I'm an Aggie fan, I'm just so distraught right now. What could have been. It's got to be it's got to be super annoying. Let's go to our top 10. All right. Who's out? Alabama's out. So Clemson was in when we started. They're out. Alabama was in. They're out. Here's who hasn't changed. I'm sorry. I'll start from the bottom because they haven't. Number 10, and I feel like I was ahead of the curve here because they're in everyone's top. They're getting into or they're in the top 10 this week in the AP and the coaches, or around 11. But I had them in last week, so just saying. 10, Notre Dame. 9, USC. These haven't changed, right? This is week 3. This hasn't changed but USC, again, that offense is stupid. Their defense can be just lying down on the field and they're still going to outscore. Okay, 10 Notre Dame, 9 USC, 8 Penn State, 7 Washington. Washington looks really good. Down 1, Utah. Utah goes from 5 to 6 because Baylor, they look like butt against Baylor. Good Lord, and that Baylor team looks horrible. That was bad. They should drop more. I should have moved Washington up, but it's just all right, a little slap on the wrist. New this week, number 5, Texas. Further win against Alabama. 4, Florida State, up 2. So they go up 2 spots from 6 to 4. And then up 1, these are all teams that are replacing Bama. Ohio State, because Michigan got bumped up to 2. And then staying at the top, Georgia. So, top to bottom, Georgia, 1, Michigan, 2, Ohio State, 3, Florida State, 4, Texas, 5, Utah, 6, Washington, 7, Penn State, 8, USC, 9, and then Notre Dame, 10. We have 3 Pac-12 teams. We only have 1 Big 12 team. We have 1 ACC team. We have, how many? We only got 1 SEC team. And we got 2 Big 10. So, 3. I'm sorry, Penn State. All right. So, fascinating. All right. Let's get to our games of the week. First of all, best bet. I have South Carolina Gamecocks at the Georgia Bulldogs at 2:30 Eastern on CBS. I am taking Georgia to cover 27.5. I barely got last week's. And there is a part of me deep down who wants to like do an inverse McGinty, but I don't think that would be fair to everyone. But because I know some people literally look at my thing and go, "Oh my god, I'm gonna take the other side of that bet because this guy's a moron," which is understandable. That's totally fine. I'm 1-2, okay, but it's not fair with that opening game with Oklahoma. I got that right, but we scored 73. Anyway, we won't talk about it. Okay, Georgia, South Carolina. The one thing I want to say about this one is I don't know how many people watched the North Carolina versus South Carolina game, which was in South Carolina. I'm almost like positive. I'm trying to recollect. Dude, that offensive line against UNC, which is mid. South Carolina's offensive line looked horrible, absolutely horrible. So against Georgia at home at 2:30, no. No way. I expect that offense to be a little bit better too, and then South Carolina has not looked good. So I really think that should cover, but I understand if someone's like, well, it's an SEC match, and maybe Georgia underestimates. Spencer Rattler is going to see ghosts, dude. That's what he always does. That guy is washed up. Dude, I really feel comfortable with this, but, I am 1-2. All right, best nightcap at 10 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. This is not going to be a great game, but the show is great. And also I didn't want to pick Arizona State 2 weeks in a row. Arizona State's going to have a good game. So check them out. But Colorado State, we have a rivalry game at Colorado. The tickets for this game, last I saw, were $250 for the cheapest, which is absolutely insane. Let me see if that's still going. Colorado State versus Colorado football. Secondary market tickets rising for Deion Sanders Buffaloes versus Colorado State game. Let me just click this because it's just I was this is insane. Yeah. SeatGeek is showing prices for the Saturday night game in Boulder ranging from between $200 and $300. The show, dude, it's a show now, which is fine. Good for Deion and good for whatever he's doing. And again, he's got his receipts. I'm on it. It's a scene. He's created a scene down there in Boulder, which they haven't had since Cordell Stewart in the 90s, right? So if you're up late at night, it's going to be a party in Boulder. So check it out. And it's a rivalry game. And again, I think everyone's kind of waiting for the beautiful part of college football was when's it all going to catch up? Because at some point you have that letdown. And Colorado has not had any semblance of a letdown. Semblance of a letdown. Oh, I got to go to bed. All right. So, speaking of nightcap, Colorado State, Colorado, it's not going to be a great game. It could be if they keep it close for some reason, but it's going to be a show. So, definitely check out the scene. All right. Most intriguing matchup, Washington at Michigan State. So Washington at Michigan State's at 5 o'clock Eastern on Peacock. And for the reasons aforementioned, Washington's been clicking. First of all, I love anything that's an interconference game. So you have Pac-12 versus Big Ten. Great. Both these teams are 2-0. Great. So you have the situation where it's Washington's on the road. It's not a night game, but it's pretty much going to be nighttime by the time the third quarter starts. So that'll help kind of juice the fans up a little bit. But again, I don't know what the fans are going to be like with this whole Mel Tucker thing. And he's not on the sidelines, right? So are the players going to get up for this game? Are they going to fight one for the new coach? What is going to happen here? Is Washington going to underestimate Michigan State? So this should be a really good game. I think part of me was going to check and see if Michigan was in the Big Ten West, but I'm pretty sure they're in the East. So, again, number 8, Washington at Michigan State. All right. Best backyard brawl. This one is a classic. Pitt, number 25, at West Virginia. This is a night game. I've been to a night game at West Virginia. The atmosphere is the most. Everyone talks about how amazing Green Bay, like not to pivot to the NFL. But, oh, Green Bay fans are the best. Oh, Green Bay is Green Bay is fine. Okay, it was a playoff game. Okay, it's not like I was at some like dud. But it is nothing compared to going into the foothills of Appalachia, where everyone is drinking their own moonshine, and they've been out there since like 11 o'clock, and it's a night game. And then if they win, they sing "Take Me Home, Country Road." Like, it's awesome. And Pittsburgh is only like 45 minutes away. So this is a rivalry that's been going on for a while. It should be a good game. The spread, I think, is like even. I'm pretty sure last time I checked, or close to even. Let me look it up right now because I've already butchered everything else in this podcast. Pitt versus West Virginia. Spread. Dog licking himself and everything. Oh, my bad. Pitt is 8-point favorite. I think it's going to be closer than that, especially since it's in West Virginia and it's a night game. But it's a rivalry game. Like, it's going to be closer than that. So you've got that. Then our game of the week, which this one I've gone back and forth on, but I really think it's going to be a good one. First of all, it's old Big 12 teams, Big 12 North teams. Kansas State, number 15, who like has been playing really, really well. Like, they're just really not getting enough credit up there in Manhattan, Kansas. They lose like one of their best players to the draft, and they're still just like clicking. And I know Texas has been doing well, and OU's been doing better, but no, TCU hasn't looked amazing, right? And this team is the current Big 12 champs, Kansas State. And they're playing their border ruffian friends in Missouri who left for the SEC a few years ago. And this is an 11 o'clock game. That's the other reason why I picked it. It's like I really try to give the 5 people who listen to this podcast like a day's worth of college football if I can help it. Again, this week is kind of a dud, but I think this game's going to be a good one. Again, interconference matchup, traditional rivalry until Missouri left to go to the SEC. There's always this like cultural clash. Like I remember I went to a Kansas State game and they were talking so much smack against Missouri because they hate people from Missouri. So that's another kind of thing of like I like about this game. It's on the SEC Network if you've got it, but it should be a good game. And maybe this was the one where I was like, oh, the spread is very, very close. I think this one is by 3. Again, I've already messed everything up on this podcast, so what is a few more typos? Missouri Tigers versus K-State spread. Tap, tap, tap. It's 5. Okay. Missouri's favored by 5. No, I'm sorry. Kansas State is favored by 5. Said Missouri will look too upset. So, I think it's going to be pretty good. So, those are the games. That is the week coming up. And before we end at around the 40-minute mark is where we're like usually averaging, the SEC is garbage. Woo! At least for now. Non-conference records versus Power 5 opponents. Right now, the Pac-12 is 6-3 versus non-conference Power 5 opponents. The ACC is 4-4. And the ACC, I think, is kind of trash. Like, the way Clemson's performing, they just have Miami and Florida State. And we'll see. Miami usually falls off anyway. Big Ten is 3-3. Big 12 is 4-5, and the SEC is a whopping 3-6. So, okay, SEC, let's go. I know OU's going there later, but anytime I can poo-poo on our boys in the SEC, I'll do it. So, apologies for any of the audio issues in this podcast and the fact I had all these spreads up. I just found it on my thing. I was going to say, by the way, my previous best bet, if anyone wants to double down on that, was Tennessee over Florida by 7. And I shied away from that. But Florida's really bad. But I don't know. That one's kind of scary. That feels like a trap. because that's on the road. But I don't think Florida's very good. So if you want to take that to the bank or inverse McGinty on that one, go for it. Again, apologies for the audio dog pausing and everything else to the few people who watch this. Just trying to get better as we go. We'll find a better spot. Good seeing you again. One more week to like a great week of college football. See ya.